Hello, everybody, and happy Wednesday. So, Stephanie, for the past 2 years, like basically since we started this podcast, we've periodically talked about how the wokeness of our military has led to recruitment shortages since Biden took office because he's just rammed the DEI agenda so far into our military to the point where using correct gender pronouns and putting up pride flags in military bases has taken precedence over any actual military preparedness. And I will be fair and say that the woke agenda really started under the Biden admin, which is when military recruitment numbers started to slow down in the first place. So I guess I can't blame it all on Biden, but the DEI push has been increased tenfold over the past few years since Biden took office. And it's to the point where we currently have a weaker military than we've ever had, which is pretty fucking scary considering our biggest enemies like China and Russia just continue to grow stronger and become more of a threat. So, Stephanie, do you want to hear something really disturbing?
Oh, I guess so. Why not?
The United States currently has the smallest active duty military that we have had in our country since 1940.
Oh, that's
1940.
great. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yep. The smallest active duty military we've had in more than 80 years since World War II.
I'm
And
not
according,
surprised though. Are you?
no, not at all. And according to federal data, across all branches, U.S. military fell more than 41,000 people short of their 2023 enlisted recruiting goals. Even gimmicks like lowering physical fitness standards for applicants and offering huge bonuses really hasn't made any difference in attracting recruits. Why? Because our military fucking sucks. Young, fit, capable, patriotic Americans don't want to serve under the Biden admin. I would say 99% of the LGBTQIA squad that they focus all their attention on catering to with this agenda is either too mentally weak to serve in any military capacity because they're too busy whining on social media about how underprivileged they are, or they're out protesting on college campuses in defense of Palestine and Hamas and a culture of people who believe that LGBTQ people shouldn't have rights in the first place and would gladly kill them if given the chance. And just in general, military age Americans are mentally and physically weak. According to a Defense Department survey back in February of this year, 57% of young Americans stated they didn't want to join the military because they were concerned they would suffer from emotional or psychological problems if they did. Then there was a Pew Research Center report from a couple months ago that showed only 23% of young people even qualify for the military because we have an obesity epidemic in America, and too many young people have disqualifying medical conditions, both physical and mental, and they can't meet the basic standards, even though the standards have already been lowered.
Can I
And if,
just jump in real quick because
yeah,
why are we not addressing this as a country? Like, I don't want to get us too off topic, but I saw there's this viral video that's going around and it shows like video footage from the 70s at the beach versus now. And in the 70s, it was like every single person was lean, everyone. And now it's like no one is. And they're like, clearly something has changed. But like it's our food system. Like what the hell are we eating? What did they do to our food? And why aren't we talking about it? Like instead they just want to prescribe like Ozempic and stuff. So I mean, you would think when it's affecting the military, that would raise some red flags. But yeah, I don't really hear anyone else talking about it. So I'm sorry. I just had to like throw that in because it's so apparent.
yeah, but like where's all the money? It's in healthcare, right?
Yeah,
So create this
exactly.
national crisis.
Hmm.
And officials at the DoD are saying that recruiting challenges are complex and multifaceted, but I think it's actually pretty simple. Like, we have created a nation, like you just said, of obese people. We've created a nation of weak men with this DEI gender fluidity narrative and the narrative of toxic masculinity being bad. We have a weak government. It's frankly our own fault as a nation that we're in this mess. And I was reading a recent article in military.com, and it was confirming that the problem is indeed a crisis of masculinity because the drop in recruitment hasn't really impacted the number of women who enlist, but it's significantly impacted male enlistment. And I thought this article was interesting because it was focused primarily on the Army. And it talked about how not only is the Army not attracting American males, but there's an overall problem of lack of motivated men in society as a whole who just don't seem to be motivated to do anything. And I think this is absolutely true. And the article also pointed out that the Army is currently juggling like multiple missions across two hemispheres. We're using troops to bolster NATO to help Ukraine. We've got deployments in the Pacific to try and rein in like China's expansion goals. We've got deployments in Africa and the Middle East. And then we have all these like prolonged training missions that take place in the United States. And because of this, the Army is stretched so thin with the lowest number of enlisted soldiers that we've had in 80 years. We currently have more American soldiers overseas than we did during the peak of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which is insane. And because of these, like the taxing pace of these deployments, American soldiers are getting burned out. They're having severe mental health issues. They're committing suicide more than ever. And then they're choosing not to reenlist when their time is up. So, what is the solution to this recruitment crisis? Well, according to Congress, it just might be a national service mandate in the form of bringing back the draft, which we have not done in America for over 50 years since 1973. So, Stephanie, we need to talk about there's two NDAA defense bills being proposed in Congress right now, and how the House version that recently passed includes automatically registering men aged 18 to 26 for the draft.
Okay, this has been the source of so much stress for me because, as you know, I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I don't agree to any of the wars that we are injecting ourselves in. But yeah, on Friday, the House passed the bill which automatically registers men age 18 to 24 for selective service. So, like you said, this was part of the annual National Defense Authorization Act. Now, this year, they authorized $895.2 billion in military spending, which is $9 billion more than this current year. And again, I just want to point out, like, it was the Pentagon that like lost trillions of dollars and never passed an audit. I'm just gonna throw that out there. But anyhow, something I didn't realize until like digging into this episode was that it's already a law that men register for selective service when turning 18, which I didn't realize that. So like I saw all these headlines about the draft and I was like freaking out. But I guess they already have to register when they turn 18, even though, like you said, the draft hasn't been invoked in half a century. And so under the current law, if they fail to register when they're 18, I guess it's considered a felony, which comes along with obviously a host of legal expenses and issues. So this new law would automatically register them. And the Congress people that are proponents of this, they're saying, well, we're doing this because it'll eliminate legal challenges and it cuts down on taxpayer dollars to fund prosecuting those cases of people, not manually registering. And so, first of all, like I said, Tara, I had no clue that men had to register when turning 18. Did you know this? I did not.
No, honestly, I
No.
didn't before
Yeah.
doing this podcast.
So it's like that will take out the step of registering, and then they use federal databases to automatically register them. And then that way, all of the money that was previously spent on advertising registration can be spent elsewhere, like readiness and mobilization. So, like, on the one hand, that makes me feel better knowing, like, oh, well, it's always been there. They're just kind of changing it around. But my question is, why now? And like, hopefully, it's just because of everything you said about like the military numbers being abysmal. And hopefully, it's not because they're prepping us to go to war and planning on invoking the draft. But my gut says they're thinking we're going to have to invoke the draft. So, like, I don't know, Tara, can I just be naive and believe, like, oh, there's not going to be a draft in my kid's future? Everything's fine. Nothing to see here. Because that's kind of where
Well,
I am as a parent.
well, hopefully, if Trump gets in office, there won't be.
That's what I keep telling myself. But when I get to the next part of the bill, I think it becomes crystal clear that we're preparing for war. So, according to a Fox News article, quote, the NDAA also included the largest ever military pay raise in history, with a 19.5% increase for junior enlisted troops and a 4.5% increase for others. It also included funding for 2 new Virginia-class submarines and the establishment of a drone force within the U.S. Army, among other provisions, end quote. That sounds like they're gearing up for war, don't you think? I mean, I'm glad like they're building up our military, but like again, why now? Like what is happening? Are we already at war and we just don't know it?
Yeah, look, I'm totally in support of increased military funding because I think we need to up our own military capabilities, not other countries' military capabilities. But I agree, like, we're clearly gearing up for something. And I'm sorry, but I don't know if a 19.5% increase in pay is going to attract the right people. I guess if they're paying the ones who are already enlisted, then like so be it. But I remember when police departments were doing this during all the anti-cop shit that took place in 2020 and 2021 when like no one wanted to become a cop and they were offering major financial incentives to new recruits. But is that really attracting people who have a heart for the job or just young people who need money? And
Right.
I want to point out too that like the one thing I love, though, about this House bill is it's trying to put a stop to the DEI agenda. It is requiring all recruitment and promotions to be based on merit and not race or ethnicity. It prohibits CRT training. It prohibits the Pentagon from funding gender transition surgeries and transgender hormone treatment. And it bans drag shows, drag queen story hours, and other similar events, which I am 100% on board with because none of these things should be a priority for military funding or training.
Okay, I had to ask you. I agree with all that. I think that's great. I didn't even know that the bill included that because I don't know about you. I've had a hard time finding a lot of information on the bill, but I do want to pick your brain for a second on the whole like woke military stuff that they implemented. Do you think they were doing that because, like in 2020, it seemed like everyone wanted this stuff. And so like they thought, "Oh, well, we're going to attract more young people." Or like I don't know, like, do you think that they're doing it on purpose? Like there's some kind of ulterior motive? Because I
I think
just
it's,
don't
yeah.
understand how they could be that dumb to think that young men are going to want to be a part of this whole like drag queen trans agenda in the military, you
I
know?
think it's 100% on purpose because when there is less masculinity, it's easier to control the population. And this push for the DEI agenda is all about getting rid of masculinity. So I think it's 100% purposeful.
It's just weird that like it's in our military. You would think the one place where they wouldn't be pushing that. So I don't know,
But
the whole
how
thing's just weird.
But if our government wants a military that they can easily control, what's the best way to do
Yeah,
that?
good point.
You
That's a
have
good
a
point.
population that's not going to fight back. And like,
Yeah.
I want to point out something that I have to bring up this story. I read this in GB News yesterday, and it has to do with Pride Month and how our government is celebrating Pride Month by giving US intelligence personnel free manicures and hosting workshops where staff can learn to crochet LGBTQ plus flags. Yeah,
What?
yeah, this is coming from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which oversees the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and it has intelligence components in every military branch. And I guess last week, the Daily Wire got a hold of this document that's announcing how all these activities are going to be taking place throughout the month, all during official working hours, by the way. And according to the document, people can have their nails painted with the pride or the trans flag colors in order to, quote, show their allyship to the community, end quote. The crocheting of the pride flags lessons are suitable for all abilities, even if you've never picked up a crochet hook. And there's an event called the Pride Ally Challenge where staff can participate in up to 20 daily activities, all of which are about 10 minutes each. And the description for the event states, quote, the challenge will take you on a guided journey to learn more about the LGBTQ plus community and empower you to become a better ally, end quote. Like, Stephanie, is this a fucking vacation tour package or a work environment?
It sounds like those activities they have like at the first week of college where they're trying to get everyone to like interact. The CIA, like, I'm sorry, but I don't even think the CIA needs to be getting manicures. Like, we need to have like tough people that don't don't want their nails manicured. Like this is I'm quite literally shocked. This is why I love that I don't read your notes sometimes ahead of time because I like to be thoroughly shocked by what you find. And I am. Oh my
This
God.
is what the Biden admin is spending fucking money on. Is this shit, right?
Our
So
money, our
our money.
taxpayer dollars.
Yes, taxpayer dollars. So, frankly, I fucking hope that the House bill passes and they get rid of this agenda within the military. But we know that the House and the Senate always come up with their own versions of the bills and then they fight over which bill will pass. And I have to point this out, Stephanie, the Senate Armed Services Committee. They're taking this registration idea a step further than the House did. And in their version of the fiscal year 2025 NDAA, they want to register women. So there was an article that came out earlier this week in Just the News, and it talks about how on page 3 of the Senate NDAA, there's a heading titled Strengthening the Joint Force and Defense Workforce. And under this heading, it states, quote, the Military Selective Service Act will be amended to require the registration of women for selective service, end quote. So the Senate also went beyond the spending budget and the House bill by 25 billion, and they came up with a $923 billion bipartisan bill that was approved by the Senate Armed Services Committee in a vote of 22-3 last Friday. This bill also involves a 4.5% pay raise for military members, as well as a 2% raise for civilian DoD employees, and it does have some kind of pay raise for junior enlisted service members, but they didn't specify the amount. But women, Stephanie, women in the draft.
Okay. And with $923 billion, they can only give a 4.5% pay raise to the people who are risking their lives for our country. Like, it's such a joke. And as a mom, it makes me sick. Like, how about we just stop going to fucking war? Like, we had no war under Trump. I cannot emphasize that enough. I'm going to say it on every damn episode. Bring him the fuck back. And like, I saw an article in Yahoo News and it said, quote, there's a growing centrist consensus among liberals and hawkish conservatives on expanding the selective service. The American Civil Liberties Union, for example, is fighting for the right of women to be conscripted and argues that the selective service is an example of overt sex discrimination, end quote. I am sorry, but as a woman, I am asking the Civil Liberties Union to shut the fuck up. Like I don't want this equality. Like men should be the ones going to war, not our 18 to 24-year-old women. And like I also want to point out these are the same damn people that refuse to define a woman. But now all of a sudden like they have to include the term woman in the draft. Like it's just the whole thing just pisses me off, Para. I'm
Well,
done.
what's interesting too is like there's really not a lot of articles talking about either of these bills and the selective service registration. And it honestly surprised me a little bit. Like almost every article I read was centered around the budget or how the House wants to get rid of DEI. So it's like, are they trying to keep this under the radar? Is it
Yeah.
legit? Like, why isn't the MSM
Because it'll
talking about
hurt
it?
Joe Biden because if people think their kids are going to be going to war, they're not going to care about LGBTQ or abortion. They're going to worry about who's going to keep us out of war, which is Trump. So I'm sure the Biden admin is like having all their cronies conveniently like not talk about this in the news.
Yeah, but it must be legit because I read articles and it's all over X, like Rep.
Mhm.
Chip Roy, Senator Mike Lee. They both slammed the Senate Armed Services Committee for wanting to register women. They posted about it on X. Donald Trump Jr. commented and he said, quote, Democrats want to draft your daughters to fight in wars that no one in America outside of the military industrial complex wants to be in, end quote, which
If
is pretty much
Trump could
what you
just
just
bring
said.
up this issue alone during the debates, he will win. Just this issue alone, saying they want to draft your daughters.
Well, the thing is, the left is trying to make it seem like Trump wants to do that because I was listening to Timcast recently, and Tim Pool just did an episode where they were talking about how the left is trying to make it look like Trump is the one who wants mandatory conscription, so they can try to get more people to vote Democrat. And I guess there was an article in the Washington Post that was saying that, this is something Trump wants. And Trump apparently like vehemently denied what was written in the article. So again, the left is pushing the narrative that this is something that's being pushed by Trump. But I do want to point out what I thought was interesting about the conversation that Tim and his co-host had on the show, because Tim suggested that in order to vote in America, you should have to register for the draft. One of the other commentators on the show suggested compulsory military service within the United States only, not being able to be deployed overseas, but having Americans be required to serve at the southern border. And I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I know you're against it, but I think it's interesting because there are dozens of countries that still have the draft. You've got countries like Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, Austria, obviously like Russia, North Korea, Israel, Brazil, and like a ton of others. And in Norway and Sweden, the draft includes women. Denmark just started making the draft mandatory for women this year. And I want to point out that Denmark, Austria, and Switzerland are all in the list of the top 10 safest countries in the world. Denmark, Sweden, and Switzerland are also in the top 10 happiest countries in the world. So maybe there's something to be said for mandatory conscription. But I don't see how that would work here in the United States. Like, I question whether even a third of our population would be mentally or physically capable of functioning in a military environment because we are so like inundated with this DEI shit. We've become so entitled and spoiled and soft that I think a majority of young people would have a fucking meltdown if they were drafted.
Yeah, and here's where I'm at with that. If this were a few years ago and Trump was still president and we were not getting ourselves involved in these ridiculous wars we shouldn't be in, I'd agree with you. I'd be like, yeah. And I would want to fight for that country, right? But knowing that we are funding these endless wars so that the elites can profit, I'm like, no, fuck you. I'm not sending my kid to go fight this war that we never should have been in the first place. So that's where it's like our nation, you have to have people that are like loyal to the nation and believe in it. And Biden has destroyed that just in a few short years. Trump can bring it back. And I think under Trump, there would be a lot of patriotic young people that would be for this. And I might even be for it. But right now, no. Like, I'm not going to send my kid to Ukraine when we shouldn't even be there. Like, it's absolutely insane. And it's scary that that's what we're talking about. And the left can say all they want that Trump wants the draft. All we have to do is look at the facts. There was not war under Trump. There was no war. He was ending war. Biden comes in and we're talking about world war now and drafts. So like just look at your own eyes and what you're witnessing instead of listening to this stupid narrative that makes no sense. So, and I do agree that we are too soft and entitled and spoiled. Cardi B, who I am no fan of anymore since she endorsed Biden last time, but she did a TikTok video talking about the draft, and it was pretty funny. I should have played it for this episode, but she was laughing and she's like, they want to draft young men. She's like, have you all been on TikTok? Have you seen the young men? And she's like, good luck with that. And she just starts
Yeah,
laughing. And I was like, oh, she is so spot
she's
on.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. And testosterone, like just looking at the facts, not only from the 70s to now has obesity like become an issue, but testosterone has dropped significantly. So there's definitely like no masculinity left. I swear it's we got to do a whole episode on that. But I do want to shift gears for a minute, but just stick with me because it all ties back to the military. So this is taking place in Idaho as we speak, where 500,000 acres of farmland is going to be basically ruined because they are curtailing the water supply. So I had to bring it up because we're always talking about how they're attacking our food supply. And I'm going to play a clip from an Idaho small farmer that went on Fox News to talk about this issue that's happening.
So, talk to us. What is going on in Idaho where they're curtailing your water supply that you need for your farms?
Well, like as you said, the state of Idaho and the Idaho Department of Water Resources has issued this curtailment of 500,000 acres. And to help put that in perspective, that's basically 781 square miles of farm ground that is being taken out of production, this is the largest curtailment in the history of the United States as far as farm ground. And of course, the worst problem is this is happening during a very plentiful water year. We have the reservoirs are completely full. And when I mean full, they're dang near breaking. The rivers are running as high as they possibly can, just trying to keep those dams from breaking. And I am personally going to look at a $3 million loss if this curtailment continues. And this will end my 135-year family farm legacy of growing potatoes in Idaho. And I'm one of the smaller farms, but let me tell you the impact. As a potato grower, I grow 23 million large orders of McDonald's French fries. And of the grain side of my operation, I grow 16 million loaves of bread. And with today's issues of farm ground being taken over and farm security, that's a significant amount. And I amount to less than 1% of really what this curtailment is about.
Brian, can't the governor and the leadership in Idaho do something about it? This just seems like it's urgent and fix it. Isn't that their job?
Yes, that is their job. The governor has the ability in the Constitution to end this curtailment. That's part of his role and part of his job. And so, yes, if the governor wanted to, we could end this curtailment today.
And why isn't he?
Because he's choosing to try to make the two groups, us and this canal system, which is down in southern Idaho, try to fight it out in what we call mitigation and come up with a private agreement amongst ourselves rather than following the way the Idaho Constitution and the water law has kind of dictated that it should be. We are checking.
Okay, so that's crazy that he's one of the smaller farms.
Yeah.
And that's like, what did he say, 16 million loaves of bread? So we can expect the price of bread and potatoes to go up. And then everything that wheat, requires wheat, which is like everything. And so looking into this, this water, Idaho water supply, they're saying, well, we want to curtail it because we need to replenish the aquifers. That's their like reasoning behind all of this. And he just said the water is plentiful. Like their reservoirs are so full, they're about to break. So I call bullshit on that reasoning. And here is what I found that I think is really happening. So there is a company called Jervis that entered into a $15 million agreement with our military in 2023 to expand cobalt mining exploration in Idaho. So I was able to find one article, Tara, one article that is from the MT Express, and it reads, quote, Jervis's focus has pivoted to mining cobalt for aerospace and weapons manufacturing. The company's $15 million agreement with the U.S. government will reimburse Jervis using money from the additional Ukraine Supplemental Appropriations Act passed by Congress this year. Cobalt is commonly used in commercial and military applications and jet engines. We absolutely believe and understand its need for defense, end quote. So what does this have to do with the Idaho farmers not having a water supply? Well, cobalt mining requires a huge amount of water. And according to the article, quote, exploratory drilling will last up to 24 hours per day, 7 days per week through mid-November 2023 before restarting again in June 2024. So there you go. That is why now in June 2024, all of a sudden they need to curtail 500,000 acres of water supply. Like they're going to destroy 500,000 acres of farmland so that they can mine cobalt for military weapons. Like what the hell?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you mentioned that you couldn't really find anything on this.
Yeah.
And when I was looking up articles, I couldn't find a fucking thing either. But interestingly, Andy Frisella talked about this on Real AF yesterday, and he played a clip from Matt Kim's podcast. So I want to play that clip and the conversation they had. It's a little long, and some of it kind of repeats what you just said, but it's a very interesting take on this whole thing.
And pulled that he started going after. And I've got some supporting stuff to even support his point. So let's just watch this clip real quick. Here's Matt Kim.
Do you wonder where all the Ukraine money is going? Well, it looks like we've started a thread to pull. Idaho is trying to shut off water to 500,000 acres of farmland, 781 miles. But there's been plenty of rain this spring, so that's not it. They say it's due to water reserves underground, that it's projected to deplete at a too fast of a rate to preserve water supply. They need to shut off the water to 500,000 acres of Idaho farmland. But the Continuing Appropriations and Ukraine Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2023 approved $4.5 billion for direct financial support to the government of Ukraine, or so they said. Jervois Global Limited enters an agreement for $15 million for information on drilling at its Idaho cobalt mine, utilizing funds from the additional Ukraine Supplemental Appropriations Act. Why is money for direct financial support for the government of Ukraine being rerouted by the Department of Defense to a cobalt mine in Idaho? Cobalt used in batteries for your phones, computers, electric cars. There are countless valuable usages for cobalt. Any side effects of cobalt we should be aware of, considering we use it in everything? Cobalt exposure triggers impairments in cognitive and anxiety-like behaviors, brain oxidative stress, and inflammation. And do you know what's a necessary component of cobalt mining en masse? Guessed it, water. Lots of water. On May 31st, 2024, Idaho Department of Water announced shutting off water to 500,000 acres of farmland. June 21st, 2024, Jervois cobalt mine can start drilling 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Idaho is shutting off water due to a shortage at the same time the cobalt mine is set to start operating 24/7. And it's Ukraine's funding bill, one of many, that gave $15 million to Jervois to restart operations after losing money. Couple of things to look further into. How many members of Congress have a financial interest in this cobalt mine? My initial research, a lot. Also, is it linked to the CHIPS Act, where they gave Micron a fistful of money to start manufacturing in Idaho? And are they trying to destroy crops so they can take the land and mine more cobalt, or is it purely to control the water supply? I was just in Idaho, absolutely beautiful state filled with great people. And the government shows up with the government gun and forces their will. Again, maybe it's just a coincidence and I'm just a conspiracy theorist. Perhaps, but one fact remains absolutely true. Money that we were told was going to Ukraine is not. There is no coincidence.
And so I looked into this, man, and I backed it up. Here's the article that he references. They are absolutely shutting off the water to the local farmers, and even the local farmers are pissed off, saying that this water curtailment will dry up their land. And more importantly, this order came after they had already paid for fertilizer at the cost of about $400 per acre. So they're already in a backload. They need this water so the crops can actually grow and they can, get the yield of the harvest. They put this in after they've already fertilized. They've already dumped a shit ton of money into their crops, and now they have no water to actually do anything with it.
They still have the water. They didn't shut it.
Okay, I'm not going to play the rest of it because it's very long, but Andy's like, they haven't shut the water off yet. And then DJ's like, yeah, but what do you think about this? And his basic response was like, this has absolutely everything to do with controlling the food supply and the global agenda, which is what we talk about all the time. And like Matt Kim was saying, like, coincidence? I don't think so.
This is the military industrial complex at play right here. The money that was supposed to be going. So Ukraine, this basically proves that Ukraine is nothing but a money laundering scheme, because money that was supposed to go directly to Ukraine to protect them from Russia is going to Idaho to mine for cobalt to make military weapons for the military industrial complex, so that all the people invested in that make a shit ton of money. Like, it's clear as day. And I don't think it's a coincidence that there is not one article out there that connects the two. There's an article about cobalt mining, and there's articles and news clips on Idaho farmers. The only people connecting the two are podcasters like Matt Kim, who I love, by the way, Andy Frisella, us. It's so clear, but they are purposely censoring this shit in the media so people can't put two and two together.
Yeah. Yeah, and in the meantime, they are destroying people's livelihoods, mainstream America, destroying their livelihoods and destroying our food supply. Like it's all fucking connected. And anyone who thinks it's not all connected needs to open their eyes.
We already know they're killing all the chickens and blowing up farms, and now they're going after the wheat. I knew there was going to be something with agriculture, and I just didn't think it would be cobalt, but there you go.
And they're still trying to ramp up the whole bird flu thing. Like we haven't talked about that lately, but again, there's articles that come across my feed every single day about how they're trying to amp this up as like the next big incoming pandemic.
Millions upon millions of chickens have been killed because of that since our last episode. And guess what? The chickens have no signs of anything wrong with them, but they're testing positive. And what test are they using? The freaking PCR test.
Yeah.
It's like, hello, wake up, people, wake up. So yeah, that's crazy. So shifting gears yet again, but just something, notable that also happened this week that has to do with war. This happened on Monday where Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, dissolved his war cabinet. And this comes after two key members resigned. So it was the cabinet minister, Benny Gantz, and he resigned in protest over the way that Netanyahu has handled the war, despite like all the calls for ceasefire. And then government minister Gadi Eisenkot, I don't know if I'm saying that right, he resigned as well. So Yahoo News reported on Gantz's resignation speech on June 9th, where he cited his reasons, quote, that a post-war plan for the enclave never materialized. And he also said that Netanyahu has not prioritized recovering the remaining Hamas-held hostages, end quote. So apparently Gantz is the guy that has like a lot of pull with all these international leaders, including the US. So, they're saying it's not a good look for Netanyahu. I don't really know enough about it. It doesn't really seem like it's going to affect a whole lot because even though the cabinet's dissolved, moving forward, like major policy decisions regarding the war is still going to be taken up by the wider security cabinet. So I don't really think it changes anything. I think it's more just like maybe a perception. I don't know. What do you think, Tara?
Yeah, from what I read, a spokesperson for the prime minister's office said the only reason they even had a war cabinet in the first place was because Gantz wanted it, and it was like a prerequisite for him. And so him leaving means there's no need for it anymore. And now Netanyahu will only have to confer with the defense minister and the strategic affairs minister. And reportedly, it's just not going to have much of an impact on decision making within Israel. It's not going to impact the chain of command. And I was reading in The Guardian that Netanyahu told his cabinet on Sunday that in order to reach his goal of eliminating Hamas, he's had to make decisions that were not always acceptable to the military echelon, including Gantz. And he told them, quote, "We have a country with an army, not an army within a country," end quote, which I thought was interesting. And regardless of how he's being perceived on the international stage, reportedly, Netanyahu's popularity within Israel has improved since Gantz departed.
Interesting. I don't know much about this Gantz, but I could just imagine like some woke like shit stirrer or something. But I don't know. At least they have an army. That's more than we can say.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll keep everyone posted. But yeah, reach out to your congressmen, your senators about this draft, because I don't want my kids being drafted. I certainly don't want my daughter being drafted. So we'll stay on top of that one. That has me worried as a parent. And we'll keep everyone posted. But thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you back here on Friday.